Not long thereafter Balerion became the first of the Targaryen dragons to be housed in the dragon pit. Its long brick-lined tunnels, sunk deep into the hillside, had been fashioned after the manner of caves, and were 5 times as large as the lairs on Dragonstone. 3 younger dragons soon joined the Black Dread under the Hill of Rhaenys, whilst Vermithor and Silverwing remained at the Red Keep, close to their riders. To ascertain there would be no repetition of Princess Aerys' escape on Balerion, the king decreed that all the dragons should be guarded night and day, regardless of where they laired. A new order of guards was created for this purpose, the Dragonkeepers, 77 strong and clad in suits of gleaming black armor, their helms crested by a row of dragon scales that continued, diminishing, down their backs. Little and less need be said of the return of Rhaena Targaryen from Estermont after her daughter's death. By the time the Raven reached her grace at Greenstone, the princess had already died and been burned. Only ashes and bones remained for her mother when Dreamfire delivered her to the Red Keep. It would seem that I am doomed to always come too late, she said. When the king offered to have the ashes interred on Dragonstone, beside those of King Aegon and the other dead of House Targaryen, Rhaena refused. She hated Dragonstone, she reminded his grace. She wanted to fly. And so saying, she took her child's ashes high into the sky on Dreamfire, and scattered them upon the winds. It was a melancholy time. Dragonstone was still hers if she wanted it, Jaehaerys told his sister, but Rhaena refused that as well. There is nothing there for me now but grief and ghosts. When Alysanne asked if she would return to Greenstone, Rhaena shook her head. There's a ghost there as well. A kinder ghost, but no less sad. The king suggested that she remain with them at court, even offering her a seat on his small council. That made his sister laugh. Oh, brother, you sweet man, I fear you would not like any counsel I might offer. Then Queen Alysanne took her sister's hand in hers and said, you are still a young woman. If you like, we could find some kind and gentle lord who would cherish you as we do. You could have other children. That only served to bring a snarl to Rhaena's lips. She snatched her hand away from the queen's and said, I fed my last husband to my dragon. If you make me take another, I may eat him myself. The place where King Jaehaerys settled his sister Rhaena in the end, was mayhaps the most unlikely seat of all, Harrenhal. Jordan Towers, one of the last lords to remain faithful to Maegor the Cruel, had died of a congestion of the chest, and Black Heron's vast ruin had passed to his last surviving son, named after the late king. All of his older brothers having perished in King Maegor's wars, Maegor Towers was the last of his line, and sickly and impoverished as well. In a castle built to house thousands, Towers dwelt alone but for a cook and 3 elderly men at arms. The castle has 5 colossal towers, the king pointed out, and the tower's boy occupies part of one. You can have the other 4. Rhaena was amused by that. One will suffice, I am sure. I have a smaller household than he does. When Alysanne reminded her that Harrenhal too was said to have ghosts, Rhaena shrugged. They are not my ghosts. They will not trouble me. And thus it came to pass that Rhaena Targaryen, daughter of 1 king, wife to 2, sister to a 3rd, spent the final years of her life in the aptly named Widow's Tower of Harrenhal, whilst across the castle yard a sickly youth named after the king who had slain the father of her children maintained his own household in the Tower of Dread. Curiously, we are told, in time, Rhaena and Maegor Towers came to forge a friendship of sorts. After his death in 61 AC, Rhaena took his servants into her own household and continued to maintain them until her own death. Rhaena Targaryen died in 73 AC, at 50 years of age. After the death of her daughter Arya, she never again visited King's Landing or Dragonstone, nor played any part in the ruling of the realm, though she did fly to Aldtown once a year to visit with her remaining daughter, Rhaella, a septa at the Starry Sept. Her hair of gold and silver turned white before the end, and the small folk of the Riverlands feared her as a witch. Travelers who turned up at the gates of Harrenhal in hope of hospitality were given bread and salt and the privilege of a night's shelter during those years, but not the honor of the queen's company. Those who were fortunate spoke of glimpsing her on the castle battlements, or seeing her coming and going on her dragon, for Rhaena continued to ride Dreamfire until the end, just as she had in the beginning. When she died, King Jaehaerys ordained that she be burned at Harrenhal and her ashes interred there. My brother Aegon died at the hands of our uncle in the battle beneath the God's Eye, his grace said at her funeral pyre. His wife, my sister Rhaena, was not with him at the battle, but she died that day as well. With Rhaena's death, Jaehaerys granted Harrenhal and all its lands and incomes to Sir Bywin Strong, the brother of Sir Lucamore Strong of his Kingsguard and a renowned knight in his own right. We have wandered decades ahead of our tale, however, for the stranger did not come for Rhaena Targaryen until 73 AC, and much and more was to pass in King's Landing and the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros before that, for both good and ill. In 57 AC, Jaehaerys and his queen found cause to rejoice again when the gods blessed them with another son. Baelon, he was named, after one of the Targaryen lords who had ruled Dragonstone before the conquest, himself a second son. Though smaller than his brother, Aemon, at birth, the new babe was louder and lustier, and his wet nurses complained that they had never known a child to suck so hard. Only 2 days before his birth, the white ravens had flown from the Citadel to announce the arrival of spring, so Baelon was immediately dubbed the Spring Prince. Prince Aemon was 2 when his brother was born, Princess Daenerys 4. The two were little alike. The princess was a lively, laughing child who bounced about the Red Keep day and night, flying everywhere on a broomstick dragon that had become her favorite toy. Mud spattered and grass stained, she was a trial to her mother and her maids alike, for they were forever losing track of her. Prince Aemon, on the other hand, was a very serious boy, cautious, careful, and obedient. Though he could not as yet read, he loved being read to, and Queen Alysanne, laughing, was oft heard to say that his first word had been, "Why?" As the children grew, Grand Maester Benefer watched them closely. The wounds left by the enmity between the conqueror's sons, Aenys and Maegor, were still fresh in the minds of many older lords, and Benefer worried lest these 2 boys likewise turn on one another to bathe the realm in blood. He need not have been concerned. Save mayhaps for twins, no brothers could ever have been closer than the sons of Jaehaerys Targaryen. As soon as he grew old enough to walk, Baelon followed his brother, Aemon, everywhere, and tried his best to imitate him in everything he did. When Aemon was given his first wooden sword to begin his training in arms, Baelon was judged to be too young to join him, but that did not stop him. He made his own sword from a stick and rushed into the yard anyway to begin whacking at his brother, reducing their master at arms to helpless laughter. Thereafter Baelon went everywhere with his stick sword, even to bed, to the despair of his mother and her maids. Prince Aemon was shy around the dragons at first, Benefer observed, but not so Baelon, who reportedly smote Balerion on the snout the first time he entered the dragon pit. He's either brave or mad, that one, old Sour Sam observed, and from that day forth the Spring Prince was also known as Baelon the Brave. The young princes loved their sister to distraction, it was plain to see, and Daenerys delighted in the boys, especially in telling them what to do. Grand Maester Benefer noted something else, however. Jaehaerys loved all 3 children fiercely, but from the moment Aemon was born, the king began to speak of him as his heir, to Queen Alysanne's displeasure. Daenerys is older, she would remind his grace. She is first in line, she should be queen. The king would never disagree, except to say, she shall be queen, when she and Aemon marry. They will rule together, just as we have. But Benefer could see that the king's words did not entirely please the queen, as he noted in his letters. Returning once again to 57 AC, that was also the year wherein Jaehaerys dismissed Lord Miles Smallwood as Hand of the King. Though undoubtedly a leal man, and well-intentioned, his lordship had shown himself to be ill-suited to the small council. As he himself would say, I was made to sit a horse, not a cushion. An older king and wiser, this time his grace told his council that he did not intend to waste a fortnight hashing over 100 names. This time he would have the hand he wanted, Septon Barth. When Lord Corbray reminded the king of Barth's low birth, Jaehaerys shrugged off his objections. If his father beat out swords and shod horses, so be it. A knight needs his sword, a horse needs shoes, and I need Barth. The new hand of the king departed within days of his elevation, taking ship for Bravos to consult with the Sea Lord and the Iron Bank. He was accompanied by Sir Giles Morrigan and 6 guardsmen, but only Septon Barth took part in the discussions. The purpose of his mission was a grave one, war or peace. King Jaehaerys had great admiration for the city of Bravos, Barth told the Sea Lord. For that reason, he had not come himself, understanding as he did the free city's bitter history with Valyria and its dragonlords. If his hand was not able to settle the matter at hand amicably, however, his grace would have no choice but to come himself on Vermithor for what Barth termed vigorous discussions. When the Sea Lord inquired as to what the matter at hand might be, The Septon gave him a sad smile and said, "Is that how this must be played? We are speaking of 3 eggs. Need I say more?" The Sea Lord said, "I admit to nothing. If I was in possession of such eggs, however, it could only be because I purchased them from a thief. How shall that be proved? Has this thief been seized, tried, found guilty? Braavos is a city of laws. Who is the rightful owner of these eggs? Can they show me proof of ownership? His Grace can show you proof of dragons." That made the Sea Lord smile. The veiled threat. Your king is most adroit at that. Stronger than his father, more subtle than his uncle. Yes, I know what Jaehaerys could do to us, if he chose. Braavos have a long memory, and we remember the dragonlords of old. There are certain things that we might do to your king as well, however. Shall I enumerate? Or do you prefer the threat veiled? However it please your lordship. As you will. Your king could burn my city down to ash, I do not doubt. Tens of thousands would die in dragon flame. Men, women, and children. I do not have the power to wreak that sort of destruction upon Westeros. Such sellswords as I might hire would flee before your knights. My fleets could sweep yours from the sea for a time, but my ships are made of wood, and wood burns. However, there is in this city a certain guild, let us say, whose members are very skilled at their chosen profession. They could not destroy King's Landing, nor fill its streets with corpses. But they could kill a few. A well-chosen few. His Grace is protected day and night by the Kingsguard. Knights, yes. Such is the man who waits for you outside. If indeed he is still waiting. What would you say if I were to tell you that Sir Giles is already dead? When Septon Barth began to rise, the Sea Lord waved him back to his seat. No, please, no need to rush away. I said what if. I did consider it. They are most skilled, as I said. Had I done so, however, you might have acted unwisely, and many more good people might have died. That is not my desire. Threats make me uncomfortable. Westerosi may be warriors, but we Braavosi are traders. Let us trade. Septon Barth settled back down. What do you offer? I do not have these eggs, of course, the Sea Lord said. You cannot prove elsewise. If I did have them, however, well, until they hatch, they are but stones. Would your king begrudge me 3 pretty stones? Now, if I had 3 chickens, I might understand his concern. I do admire your Jaehaerys, though. He is a great improvement on his uncle, and Braavos does not wish to see him so unhappy. So instead of stones, let me offer gold. And with that the real bargaining began. There are those even today who will insist that Septon Barth was made a fool of by the Sea Lord, that he was lied to, cheated, and humiliated. They point to the fact that he returned to King's Landing without a single dragon's egg. This is true. What he did bring back was not of inconsiderable value, however. At the Sea Lord's urging, the Iron Bank of Braavos forgave the entire remaining principal of its loan to the Iron Throne. At a stroke, the crown's debt had been cut in half. And all at the cost of 3 stones, Barth told the king. The Sea Lord had best hope that they remain stones, Jaehaerys said. If I should hear so much as a whisper of chickens, his palace will be the first to burn. The agreement with the Iron Bank would have great impact for all the people of the realm over the coming years and decades, though the extent of that was not immediately apparent. The king's shrewd master of coin, Rego Draz, pored over the crown's debts and incomes carefully after Septon Barth's return, and concluded that the coin that would previously have had to be sent to Braavos could now be safely diverted to a project the king had long wished to undertake at home. Further improvements to King's Landing. Jaehaerys had widened and straightened the streets of the city, and put down cobblestones where previously there had been mud, but much and more remained to be done. King's Landing in its present state could not compare to Aldtown, nor even Lannisport, let alone the splendid free cities across the narrow sea. His Grace was determined that it should. Accordingly, he set out plans for a series of drains and sewers, to carry the city's offal and night soil under the streets to the river. Septon Barth drew the king's attention to an even more urgent problem. King's Landing's drinking water was fit only for horses and swine, in the opinion of many. The river water was muddy, and the king's new sewers would soon make it worse. The waters of the Blackwater Bay were brackish at the best of times, and salty at the worst. Whilst the king and his court and the city's highborn drank ale and meat and wine, these foul waters were oft the only choice for the poor. To address the problem, Barth proposed sinking wells, some inside the city proper and others to the north, beyond the walls. A series of glazed clay pipes and tunnels would carry the fresh water into the city, where it would be stored in 4 huge cisterns and made available to the small folk from public fountains in certain squares and crossroads. Barth's scheme was costly, beyond a doubt, and Rego Draz King Jaehaerys balked at the expense, until Queen Alysanne served each of them a tankard of river water at the next council meeting, and dared them to drink of it. The water went undrunk, but the wells and pipes were soon approved. Construction would require more than a dozen years, but in the end, the Queen's fountains provided clean water for King's Landers for many generations to come. Several years had passed since the king had last made a progress, so plans were laid in 58 AC for Jaehaerys and Alysanne to make their first visit to Winterfell and the north. Their dragons would be with them, of course, but beyond the neck the distances were great and the roads poor, and the king had grown tired of flying ahead and waiting for his escort to catch up. This time, he decreed, his Kingsguard, servants, and retainers would go ahead of him, to make things ready for his arrival. And thus it was that 3 ships set sail from King's Landing for White Harbor, where he and the Queen were to make their first stop. The gods and the free cities had other plans, however. Even as Theking's ships were beating their way north, envoys from Pentos and Tyrosh called upon His Grace in the Red Keep. The 2 cities had been at war for 3 years and were now desirous of making peace, but could not agree on where they might meet to discuss terms. The conflict had caused serious disruption to trade upon the Narrow Sea, to the extent that King Jaehaerys had offered both cities his help in ending their hostilities. After long discussion, the Archon of Tyrosh and the Prince of Pentos had agreed to meet in King's Landing to settle their differences, provided that Jaehaerys would act as an intermediary between them, and guarantee the terms of any resulting treaty. It was a proposal that neither the king nor his council felt he could refuse, but it would mean postponing His Grace's planned progress to the north, and there was concern that the notoriously prickly Lord of Winterfell might take that for a slight. Queen Alysanne provided the solution. She would go ahead as planned, alone, whilst the king played host to the prince and Archon. Jaehaerys could join her at Winterfell as soon as the peace had been concluded. And so it was agreed. Queen Alysanne's travels began in the city of White Harbor, where tens of thousands of northerners turned out to cheer her and gape at Silverwing with awe, and a bit of terror. It was the first time any of them had seen a dragon. The size of the crowd surprised even their lord. I had not known there were so many small folk in the city, Theomore Manderly is reported to have said. Where did they all come from? The Manderlys were unique amongst the great houses of the north. Having originated in the Reach centuries before, they had found refuge near the mouth of the White Knife when rivals drove them from their rich lands along the Mander. Though fiercely loyal to the Starks of Winterfell, they had brought their own gods with them from the south, and still worshipped the Seven and kept the traditions of knighthood. Alysanne Targaryen, ever desirous of binding the 7 kingdoms closer together, saw an opportunity in Lord Theomore's famously large family, and promptly set about arranging marriages. By the time she took her leave, 2 of her ladies-in-waiting had been betrothed to his lordship's younger sons and a third to a nephew. His eldest daughter and 3 nieces, meanwhile, had been added to the queen's own party, with the understanding that they would travel south with her and there be pledged to suitable lords and knights of the king's court. Lord Manderly entertained the queen lavishly. At the welcoming feast an entire aurochs was roasted, and his lordship's daughter Jessamine acted as the queen's cupbearer, filling her tankard with a strong northern ale that her grace pronounced finer than any wine she had ever tasted. Manderly also staged a small tourney in the queen's honor, to show the prowess of his knights. One of the fighters, though no knight, was revealed to be a woman, a wildling girl who had been captured by rangers north of the wall and given to one of Lord Manderly's household knights to foster. Delighted by the girl's daring, Alysanne summoned her own sworn shield, Jonquil Dark, and the Wildling and the Scarlet Shadow dueled spear against sword whilst the Northmen roared in approval. A few days later, the queen convened her women's court in Lord Manderly's own hall, a thing hitherto unheard of in the north, and more than 200 women and girls gathered to share their thoughts, concerns, and grievances with her grace. After taking leave of White Harbor, the queen's retinue sailed up the White Knife to its rapids, then proceeded overland to Winterfell, whilst Alysanne herself flew ahead on Silverwing. The warmth of her reception at White Harbor was not to be duplicated at the ancient seat of the kings in the north, where Alaric Stark and his sons alone emerged to greet her when her dragon landed before his castle gates. Lord Alaric had a flinty reputation, a hard man, people said, stern and unforgiving, tight-fisted almost to the point of being niggardly, humorless, joyless, cold. Even Theomore Manderley, who was his bannerman, had not disagreed. Stark was well respected in the north, he said, but not loved. Lord Manderley's fool had put it elsewise. Methinks Lord Alaric has not moved his bowels since he was 12. Her reception at Winterfell did nothing to disabuse the Queen's fears as to what she might expect from House Stark. Even before dismounting to bend the knee, Lord Alaric looked askance at her Grace's clothing and said, "I hope you brought something warmer than that." He then proceeded to declare that he did not want her dragon inside his walls. "I've not seen Harrenhal, but I know what happened there. Her knights and ladies he would receive when they got here, and the king too, if he can find the way, but they should not overstay their welcome. This is the north, and winter is coming. We cannot feed 1,000 men for long." When the queen assured him that only a tenth that number would be coming, Lord Alaric grunted and said, "That's good. Fewer would be even better." As had been feared, he was plainly unhappy that King Jaehaerys had not deigned to accompany her, and confessed to being uncertain how to entertain a queen. "If you are expecting balls and masks and dances, you have come to the wrong place." Lord Alaric had lost his wife 3 years earlier. When the Queen expressed regret that she had never had the pleasure of meeting Lady Stark, the Northman said, "She was a Mormont of Bear Isle, and no lady by your lights, but she took an axe to a pack of wolves when she was 12, killed 2 of them, and sewed a cloak from their skins. She gave me 2 strong sons as well, and a daughter as sweet to look upon as any of your Southron ladies.